Well, here's a news flash for you.
What news?
Tell us a story.
Yes, tell us a story.
What is this? Good news, bad news?
I've got the story. I've got the story.
Gone all summer without a scrap of news.
Good news and bad news.
That's good news. If I'm gonna do this, I'll need my news team at my side.
News team, assemble!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Movie News Network, the official podcast of MovieNewsNet.com. I'm your host, David Wall, and joining me today are a few of the other writers for the website. First up, we got Darby Harn. How's it going, Darby?
Going good.
And we also have Alex Newman. How's it going, Alex?
Yeah, good, thank you. How you doing?
Doing good. And so, yeah, on today's show, we're going to be going through the biggest film news of the past couple weeks, along with our takes on each story. Then we'll give you some recommendations on what to watch and wrap up with a few stories that we just can't stop thinking about. So without further ado, let's get into the news. First up, huge news out of the DC universe. Michael Keaton will be returning to the role of Batman in the upcoming Flash solo film. Likely taking Flashpoint as an inspiration, the new film will open up the doors to a DC multiverse, which has been hinted at in Ezra Miller's appearance on the CW's Crisis on Infinite Earths. This will be Keaton's first time back in the role since 1992 in Batman Returns, and The Flash will be directed by Andy Muschietti, who is known for directing the It films. So let's go over to you, Alex. What do you think about Michael Keaton coming back as Batman?
I think it's like whoever thought about it, put it in the script and orchestrated it, it's really just like a knockout, hit out of the park, really, isn't it? It's just, it kind of like fires on all cylinders of like nostalgia. Michael Keaton's still big, getting their DC universe back on track by kind of getting rid of all tracks by going for a multiverse kind of theory. And, Michael Keaton's proven he's still good at superhero movies when he did Homecoming a few years back. I think that's just really, I can't really see any bad points to it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Michael Keaton, I think at the time, even, he was kind of a bizarre choice for Batman. Mm-hmm. And I still think when watching those movies, he's just kind of like a funny, weird Bruce Wayne. But I'm into it, and I love those movies. They're so nostalgic for me. But
yeah, he definitely feels more Beetlejuice than Batman, doesn't he?
Yeah. It's so interesting to think that the Tim Burton universe is coming back. And I wonder how much, if we see that world, how much they're going to try to keep it feeling like Tim Burton's movies. That would be fantastic to me. But like you said, I love the fact that they're bringing in this multiverse, because what's been a thing about the DC universe for me lately is like some of the movies are pretty good and some of them are absolutely terrible. And I feel like the canon of it has been all over the place. Like, I think you said it maybe an episode or two ago, Alex, was that it feels like the X-Men universe, in that like Definitely. The canon wasn't really important to them. And this, I feel like, is a way for them to just do some hand waving and be like, but it's a multiverse. Like, none of the canon doesn't necessarily need to line up perfectly everywhere across the board. There's a Robert Pattinson Batman. There's a Joker that's Joaquin Phoenix. There's a Joker that's whatever his name
Jared
is.
Leto.
Jared Leto.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that, because it kind of makes that stuff makes sense, and you can just kind of shrug and move on now, as opposed to being all super confused about the canon of it. So I don't know. I'm excited about it. What do you think, Darby?
I think it's great. I just, as a Batman fan, the original Batman, Tim Burton, I'm kind of curious if this will actually be the Tim Burton Batman, or this will be in the Flashpoint comic. The villain was actually an alternate Batman who was Thomas Wayne, who is Bruce's father. And so I wonder if there might be some sleight of hand there. But,
interesting.
It's probably just the original Tim Burton Batman, which is great. And like you said, it opens up the door then. It's going to allow them to integrate Robert Pattinson into the existing DC continuity without having to explain away like why was there Ben Affleck and now there's Robert Pattinson. They'll just be able to say, well, all these doors have opened up because of Flashpoint, which is in keeping with DC continuity because it's always been, they've done Crisis on Infinite Earths, they've done Final Crisis, there's been a million crises, I guess, and they've always tried to integrate into one continuity. It's never worked. And so the films are just like, well, let's just lean into it. So
and it opens up the door for, if obviously, there was the whole, we're not going to have Henry Cavill back. Oh, yes, we are. It opens up the door for them to be like, well, if things work out in the future and Ben Affleck wants to come back just for a little bit, maybe just a cameo, we can make that happen now. They're not writing anyone off. And the DC TV universe has been doing it for years. Flash's dad in the new TV show Flash is the Flash from the 90s. Mark Hamill came back as the Trickster from the Flash of a different Earth. So they hand wave it, Yes, Mark Hamill's back at the Trickster, but who cares if he's the same Trickster or a different Trickster? It's the fact that he's playing that role, and that's fun. And I feel like they might do that a bit with Michael Keaton.
Yeah, and that's what people recognize Michael Keaton as. So I think you're right, Darby, that they're going to keep him as Bruce Wayne. Like, they're not going to make him a new character. But it is interesting. Like, I feel like the Flashpoint now is a way for them to just link everything together without working too hard. And then they can it'll feel more like the Marvel Cinematic Universe because it still feels like everything's connected, but they can just try to make good films without worrying too much about the overall continuity, which I think is going to work to their benefit.
Yeah. Which is where Marvel Fox X-Men universe was really the only strength it had over the MCU. You want to integrate something into the MCU, you're probably in a 4 or 5 year waiting list to get that worked into what they've got and their plans, maybe even 10 years at this point. With that, they got, Ryan Reynolds got behind a Deadpool movie, he got it going, he made it, they could just integrate it. He's breaking the fourth wall, who cares? Whereas now, if someone made a breaking the fourth wall MCU movie, I think people would have an issue. I'd have an issue. I'd be a bit like, oh, well, you can't change the tone like this.
Yeah.
But and I think that's the same with the DC universe. They can do what they want and no one's going to kick up a fuss.
What I think is super interesting is that the MCU seems to be headed this direction itself. At least, with Doctor Strange, the next movie seems to be dealing with the multiverse. WandaVision seems to be dealing with it also. Loki. Maybe. This is super interesting that they'd both be leaning this way, but it opens up huge possibilities for both because I think what you were just saying, Alex, with the Fox characters, this may be a way for the MCU to actually integrate the Fox characters or universe if they want to. I doubt that they do, but maybe if they want to integrate some of those characters, they can do it this way. So that's super fascinating to me, like how they approach that, because the sky's the limit now.
It is fascinating to see the change in tones over the years, because originally when that DCEU was announced, it was essentially, all right, the TV shows, the CW TV shows, you are second tier, they were not connected. Suicide Squad was a really cool theme in season 2 of Arrow. It was awesome how they did it. It was really well set up. It was villains from the first couple of seasons of Arrow, then all came back together, and Arrow's right-hand man, John Diggle, was in charge of the Suicide Squad, and they had an Amanda Waller and everything. They scrapped it all when DC announced that they were doing a Suicide Squad because they didn't want people to be confused. And then obviously, A, no one cares, B, Suicide Squad was rubbish. And C, now, and at the time it was like, oh, Flash might have to get cancelled because they're planning a Flash film for 2020 something. Well, now we've gotten to the point where they acknowledged the Flash in the Flash, and it's just, they've just gone, all right, well, let's just have it all.
And that's all to their benefit. Like, now we're going to get, who knows, we'll just have, Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, we're going to, Christian Bale, they're all going to be lined up in one shot, animated Batman.
Did you ever see that Power Rangers where it was the special where all the Red Rangers came back together?
No.
It's going to be like that. Well, they had one special where the Red Power Ranger from 5 or 6 generations of Power Rangers all were in one special episode. It's going to be like that, but with Batman.
But who knows? That is what the potential is here now that they have decided to embrace all of it through the multiverse. Okay, so let's move on to our next story. AMC Theaters recently unveiled their plan to reopen theaters in the United States, but shockingly, that plan did not include requiring customers to wear masks. CEO and President Adam Aron said a desire to avoid being drawn into political controversy was the reason behind it. But that backfired in epic fashion because less than 24 hours later, after an extremely loud public outcry, the theater chain reversed its position about wearing masks. So let's go over to you, Darby. I know that you wrote a heated editorial about this.
Slightly.
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I'm glad that they reversed the decision because that was epically misguided. The initial decision itself, and then the way it was framed by Aaron was, they wanted to avoid a political controversy. There's nothing political about public health. I suppose there is, but for in the moment that we're in and the situation that we're in, especially given the last few days here in the States. It's just inconceivable that they would even consider that or say something like that. I think the tone deafness of it is incredible, considering that you have to assume that Aaron has a bunch of consumer studies on his desk, which tell him that people are terrified about the crisis. They're terrified about public spaces, and the theaters are one of those places where people gather en masse. So. It's unfortunate. It was also completely avoidable because they ended up postponing these big releases, which we'll probably talk about later with Tenet and Mulan anyway, which pushes back the AMC rollout. And I think it's just a reflection of the fact that the world we're living in has changed. The way that we consume movies has changed. The way that we think about. We walk, any store, anywhere you walk into, there's a sign on the door that says no shirts, no shoes, no service. There's no functional difference between that and wearing a mask. And there's nothing political about that. No one ever argues about that. But there's a element of this which is the most important thing, especially right now, where places like Florida, I think almost 10,000 cases the other day. It's just, if you're going to open up, you have to do everything you can to protect yourself and then, in AMC's case, your clientele. So,
yeah, I think it's interesting because even with this policy, I'm sure once people get into the dark of the theater, they're going to take their mask off to eat popcorn, right. And people are going to disobey the rules. But I do think that this policy will at least cause some people to wear a mask that wouldn't if there was no sign on the door. But I think what's almost hilarious about this is that he cited a political controversy that he was trying to avoid, and by not including this, he roped himself completely and the company completely into a political controversy that the exact one he was trying to avoid. So it completely backfired, and I feel like, I'm not going to be in the theaters. I'm definitely not. I'm going to be watching stuff at home. If movies get released on demand, I'll support them that way, and I'm going to be going to the drive-in. But just the fact that you can be asymptomatic and still spread the virus, that's the reason people are wearing masks. It's because you're trying to protect other people and you're trying to be courteous to other people. They listened, which is good, but it's funny that they were reactionary enough to be like, never mind. It's just so it's good. It means that they are paying attention to what the people want, I suppose. I don't know. It's an interesting story. What do you think, Alex?
It is an odd one. I think it is very I don't know, I guess hilarious is the word you'd use, but that he said, why would you in your statement say the word political controversy? Don't say those words. It seems like by saying that it's sort of like summoning it, and you're making it political by hinting that your decision could have been political,
right?
But it's weird because here, so cinemas are opening. One's opening chain is opening next week, and the rest are opening the week after, the 14th or something like that, or the 10th of July. And so the one opening next week is Odeon, which is owned by AMC. It's their European subsidiary. And it's odd because I checked the websites today and none of the UK ones are making you wear a mask.
Wow.
And there was no controversy when that came out. No one said anything, which is weird because the idea of it is nowhere near as politicized as it is in America. Right. It's odd. There's going to be spaced seating and they're going to clean more thoroughly and they're going to have staggered screen times, so that's good. If I do end up going, I'm going to be wearing a mask, obviously.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with AMC and with all the other theaters that are reopening up right now. Okay, so let's move on to our next story. Margot Robbie will star in a new Pirates of the Caribbean film written by Christina Hodson. She's known for her work on Birds of Prey. This is going to be a female-centric spinoff, and it's going to be separate from a previously announced project in the Pirates of the Caribbean universe that's being developed by Chernobyl's Craig Mazin. And that one's also being developed by one of the original screenwriters, Ted Elliott. So what do you think, Alex, about this new Margot Robbie Pirates of the Caribbean movie?
I think it's good. It's exciting. I like Birds of Prey. I know a lot of people didn't see it because it sort of got cut off from its cinema run, which is unfortunate. But the movie was fun, and it was a good use of Margot Robbie, sort of expanding on her Harley Quinn role. So I'm kind of excited to see the sort of I imagine it'll be a sort of Pirates of the Caribbean version of that. She got sort of like the Birds of Prey sort of female squad together, and I imagine it might be a similar version of that, but with pirates, which I'm not against. I think the only thing they maybe have to worry about is writing her a bit too hard as a female Captain Jack Sparrow. That would be my only worry, would just be like, let's make her kooky and weird. It's like, well, you've got to be careful, otherwise people are just going to call out those similarities. But overall, I'm excited.
I don't want them to, like you said, do a repeat of Captain Jack Sparrow. And I saw people online being like, we want Captain Jack. Bring back, what? Like, I'm done with Captain Jack. Like, if we're going to make more Pirates of the Caribbean movies, let's make them different. And if we have to, if Disney is intent on us getting more Pirates movies, let's go in different directions, new characters. I'm all the way for that. And
I liked it more when it was just fun. Like, to me, like, people really criticized the fourth one, the one with Penelope Cruz and Ian McShane. People criticized that one, but to me, I loved that one more than the third one. I thought the third one got weird and really oddly connected, and someone was someone's former wife, and the ending was depressing, and it was just all over the place to me. I thought the fourth one was just like, let's just have Captain Jack Sparrow and Barbossa just go and like hunt this treasury thing, and let's just have fun with that. And I was like, I liked that more than when it kind of got up its own arse about the whole thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. What do you think, Darby, about this new movie?
I can't really get excited about any of the pirate stuff, although, I mean, I really enjoyed the first couple films. I agree wholeheartedly with Alex that it absolutely went off the rails. But I like Margot Robbie a lot. I was a fan of Birds of Prey. I thought they kind of missed their mark a little bit in what they were trying to do there. And that's more just me being a nerd, a DC nerd. I was sort of waiting for Poison Ivy to show up. Didn't happen. I was like, some of these things don't make sense, but I like the movie. Margot Robbie's great. The idea of her being sort of in a pirate movie, this particular universe, could be really interesting because she likes to really get into different kinds of characters. Although I agree, she needs to stay completely away from the Jack Sparrow kind of thing, and they just need to do their own whatever it's going to be. But
it is hard to know because we're saying that don't be like Jack Sparrow, but then we don't have an answer for what you want it to be like. Because if they write her too, straight faced, everyone will be like, "Oh, this is another Will Turner situation." They're writing themselves into her being boring and her second tier characters being interesting. But if you write her kind of like weird, everyone goes Jack Sparrow, and if you write her a little bit more aggressively airy-fairy, everyone will say it's just Harley Quinn but with pirates.
I think there's an opportunity for them to do something really interesting. There's quite a few stories of female pirates from history who Anne Bonny and people like that they could base her on. If they really want to get into the gender politics of it, it could be interesting. But I don't know, it being a Disney movie, I don't know how, with some sort of fantasy elements, I don't know how involved that will get. But if they wanted to, it could be, interesting at least.
I also think like fans of franchises, and when we talk about franchises and characterizations in franchises, we get so comparative. And I think that like they just need to write a character. They just need to write a new character and just try to be distinct from Jack Sparrow. And when Rogue One came out, people were like, "Oh, this is Cassian's just a new version of Han Solo." It's like, it's a new character. We as fans get comparative of other characters, and then I think writers get stuck in that way where they kind of can't help but like make a new version of an old character.
I suppose you almost want to go in universe and be like, she's a different person. What's that got to do with
Right.
Jack Sparrow? Like, she's a different person. If she happens to be like this person that we happen to have seen in another movie, like, who cares?
It's true. Like yeah. I feel like all pirates kind of have that very selfish interests. They're very, greedy in that way. So those things, of course, can stay. But I guess the way they deal with things, the choices that they make need to be different. So, yeah, there are similarities for sure in any two characters in a franchise because they're in the same world. But
I'm just wondering if between them making this one, they've distinguished between them making like a new set of series of Pirates of the Caribbean and this Margot Robbie led one. Then in a few years, we're going to get Pirates of the Caribbean with their multiverse theory, and then we're going to just go from there.
Yeah, multiverse is the new universe.
Yeah, exactly. Why have one when you can have many?
Okay, so let's keep going. Our last big news story that we wanted to talk about. In a unique time for movie theaters, an old fossil has returned to the #1 spot at the U.S. box office, thanks in large part to the 300 drive-ins in operation across the country. The unlikely juggernaut Jurassic Park has reclaimed its place, followed closely by Jaws. Each of these classic Spielberg films made around $515,000 at the U.S. box office. So let's go over to you, Darby. What do you think about Jurassic Park and Jaws coming back and becoming #1 at the box office years later?
Well, on one hand, I think it's great. It's they're great movies, and it's sort of not surprising that the sort of old standbys like Jurassic Park would find their way back at the top in a situation like this. I think it's curious though too that both of these particular films are the things that people are watching and want to watch. They're both movies that are essentially monster movies, but they're also about nature, which is essentially overwhelmed society. And I think we're living in a moment in which that kind of, that's kind of the case. We're not being chased around by big giant monsters, but nature's kind of elbowed us pretty hard. So I think that's interesting. I think people want to watch or read and consider things like that if it's not necessarily to do with the pandemic. I have a feeling in the next year or two we're going to get a ton of sort of pandemic related films and things like that. But for the moment, it's not completely surprising.
It's interesting because I actually was one of the people who went and saw Jaws at a drive-in last weekend, and it was great. It was really fun. It was a great experience, and the movie looked great, sounded great on my stereo speakers in the car. But like you said, Darby, while watching it, I couldn't help, especially Jaws, the story, it's almost like it was made in commentary of the pandemic. Not only is there a threat that people don't believe is a threat, there's also the financial aspect of reopening the towns and trying to make as much money as possible from the tourists, even though they are put at risk of their lives. It feels like such a commentary on this moment. So it was really fun watching that, but also eerie and bizarre. But I'm so happy that theaters, whether they're a drive-in or whether they're, traditional theaters that are reopening right now, that they're taking advantage of the time that where we don't have new releases, going back and releasing, these classic blockbusters, because they know people want to go see a movie that is super culturally renowned, like Jaws or Jurassic Park. These are movies that you can take your kids to, and even though they're about monsters ripping people to shreds, I think that like they're a perfect movie to go to at a time when there's nothing new to go see right now. So what do you think, Alex, about these two Spielberg films clawing their way back to the top?
Well, yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's surprising. I suppose, like you said, with the lack of new content, these are sort of your classic go-tos. I'm more surprised about Jaws than I am about Jurassic Park. I haven't seen Jaws in a long time, but I know that Jurassic Park holds up particularly well, and is sort of quite timeless. And I think, considering, what are we getting onto now? What was it, 94 that Jurassic Park came out?
93.
93. So yeah, we're coming up to 30. And I think it's just a testament to how good those films are and how timeless they are, that people do want to share them with their kids and they want to see them again, and they want to see them on the big screen. They know that they have an impact on them. There's a difference between watching it at home and between watching it at the cinema, and they want to share that and go see something they love, but something that's going to make them feel a range of emotions like films do. And I think it's also a sort of commentary on we do need films that challenge us, and we do need films that reveal things and tell us things that we want to know and challenge our perceptions and our prejudices. But sometimes the things that are going to last and be sort of the big shining lights are things that entertain us, the things that distract us, like show us things that we're not, or hopefully not, going to see in our real life.
Right.
And I think it's just a testament to that, like you said, the monster movies are the ones that people wanted to see, is because, people don't want dinosaurs running around killing them in real life, but it's amazing to see it on the screen, and it's amazing to imagine that concept. And so I think it's just nice that they're the sort of two films that have done well. I think they're good. They're literally the poster child for like classic action, but like, I guess, family friendly blockbusters to go see.
And they each only made $500,000, which sounds low, but that's actually quite a bit of money when you can think about I think there's only 1,000 or so movie theaters open when you include the 300 drive-ins that are open right now. So,
and with drive-ins, you pay by the car, right? Don't pay by the ticket.
It depends.
Is that right?
But
okay.
It depends. But a lot of time you pay by the car. But actually, the one that we went to, you did pay per person. So that's kind of interesting. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what other classic movies pop up throughout the summer as we keep going and theaters keep reopening and with nothing to show. Speaking of movies being delayed and not coming out anytime soon, let's get into our next segment, which is The Delay After Tomorrow. Surprising no one, at least no one here at this table, I would assume. Tenet has once again been delayed. This is the second time in the past 2 weeks that it's been delayed. It has been pushed another 2 weeks from its second release date there to August 12th. And then also Mulan has been delayed to August 21st, about a week later. And then also the Oscars have been pushed to April 2021. They usually air in February or March. So let's go to you, Darby. What do you think about Tenet and Mulan being pushed, and as well as the Oscars?
Well, I think it's sadly inevitable given the circumstances with the virus that hasn't improved. It's actually deteriorated here in the States. It's optimistic, this sort of pushing each back by a couple weeks. It's not particularly realistic, and I think myself, I've become very doubtful that any of these are actually going to open. That things, unless there's a dramatic reversal with the way things are going, which I hope so, knock on wood, unless there's something changes dramatically with the virus, I just don't see it. And unless New York and LA open their theaters, which both still have not, and the way things are going in LA in particular, I don't see that happening. Those movies aren't coming out. And the longer that goes on, the more of a train wreck it becomes for the theaters in general. So it's getting really dicey, I think, for them. And we talked about this last time on the last episode we were together, but I think the longer we go into the fall, and when you run into Wonder Woman and Black Widow, things like that, if those were to be pushed beyond 2020, I think the streaming option starts becoming more and more of a serious thing, because the studios face the same revenue situation that the theaters do.
And what do you think about the Oscars, Darby?
I think that's inevitably going to be pushed even further too, because assuming there's this domino effect of the movies being pushed back, what will the Oscars be able to show or discuss or to award? So
Sonic,
right? So that's my thought. It'll probably end up being pushed. But
what are your thoughts, Alex? Do you think Tenet and Mulan are actually going to make it to theaters this year?
I think they will make it this year. I can't speak as intensely for America and how you guys, whether you guys. So, any cinemas open at the moment?
AMC, per the Deadline article where they announced the postponement of Tenet, they said AMC had intended to open on the 15th, likely per an AMC source to be the 30th of July.
In the UK, like I said, it'd be sometime next week or the week after they're opening. But obviously now they're not going to have any content for over a month. So whether they hold open just with, they've got a few things coming back on, they're re-showing Empire Strikes Back, that kind of thing. Whether they hold out for that until the releases come, or if they push it back in the UK, I'm not sure. But you wonder if they will hit a point where if the cinemas are all open here and they want to inject cash into the system, they might release it in the UK, but not in America. Because it'll be worth that price difference to, people might pirate it, all that kind of stuff, but the money they'll lose versus the money they'll gain in the UK, and then people who will see it in America when it finally comes out might be beneficial to that price difference of a pirating.
That might generate some interest for when it comes out in the US, but I also am like, will Christopher Nolan be okay with spoilers being out there? I feel like he's so controlling of that, so I don't know if,
Yeah. And maybe with, again, we don't know. I have very high hopes for Mulan, but with Disney's track record of live action remakes, they might not want 2-3 months of UK European reviews out there to taint the American release.
The fact that they are continually pushing these, but optimistically hanging on to these, is a testament to how confident they are in these movies. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. Just to think that, there are plenty of other movies that were set for this summer that Warner Brothers and Disney pushed. So the fact that they're still hanging on to these, I think, means that they're probably decent movies.
Yeah,
but
if it was Dumbo, they would have released it on VOD.
Right, that day. But I think that this is just a Band-Aid that they keep sticking on it, hopeful that theaters are going to reopen and that they can make as much money as possible. But I think that you're right, Darby. It is a little too optimistic. I just wish that they would do a VOD release in August and a simultaneous limited theaters and drive-in release. I feel like that would make them the most money. And then maybe next year, if the movies are good enough and they made the cultural impact that they wanted, then they can do like a big release in theaters again and make a bunch of money on this same movie again. I think that would be a decent fix to this whole situation. But in the Oscars, I actually think that they will hold this, because I read that the Oscars allowed VOD movies to be included this year, which is, I think, a big deal. So I think a lot of these Oscar-y movies that have already shot, Oscar bait type movies, are going to release on VOD, and then the Oscars are still going to have plenty of stuff to award by the end of the year, because that usually doesn't happen until November, December, and January, when all of these movies come out anyway. So I think that those will still release, but mostly on VOD, and then we'll get a decent Oscars in 2021. But that's just my feeling on it. Okay, so let's move on to our next segment. This is a new segment called Tinker Trailer Soldier Spy. What we're going to be doing in this segment is we're going to just be talking about all of the new trailers that were released in the past couple weeks, of which there were many. Okay, first up is The King's Man.
This will not be a war of heroes.
Let's go over to you, Alex. What did you think of the King's Man trailer?
Firstly, I'm excited for the future when people go, "Oh, I really love King. Have you seen Kingsman? I love Kingsman," and people go, "Kingsman or Kingsman?" I'm hell excited for those conversations. No, I really enjoyed the trailer. Beforehand, like they released that sort of teaser one a few months ago, and I was like, "Yeah, this looks fine. This looks a lot funner than the original trailer."
Definitely.
The original trailer, like, it still looks dark, but there's a lot of fun to it. I did like the grittier look to it. I love a good bit of revisionist history. I think that's something comic books do really well, and TV shows and movies don't do quite as much. So I think it's really fun to see that, the super council of famous villains, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You just know Rasputin's gonna just like either have been assassinated a bunch of times, or the running joke's going to be that they try to kill him and he won't die. Like, they kind of allude to that in the trailer, so you just know that's going to keep happening. Yeah, there's a lot of history in there, which I kind of liked. I love a good bit of, the bit where he blows up the front car. I was like, is that a World War One reference? Because that's how World War One was started with Franz Ferdinand.
Franz Ferdinand there?
Yeah, but if Franz, like, as far as the Wikipedia listings go, Franz Ferdinand isn't a character.
Okay.
But speaking of characters, the cast is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just like Ralph Fiennes, Gemma Atherton, Rhys Ifans, Daniel Bruhl, Jaimin Honasu, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Stanley Tucci. It's like insane. I also thought it was interesting that Tom Hollander is playing 3 characters in it, and he's playing George V, Wilhelm II, and Nicholas II, who were the leaders of the UK, Russia, and Germany pre-World War One. So I imagine there'll be some sort of running gag where it's the same guy that looks like he's running the 3 big states. So
that's fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's going to be good. I think it's a good addition to the universe. It's a good way to sort of change things up while we wait for the trilogy to finish up.
Yeah, the action looks really cool in this. I feel like that was what was missing from the first trailer for me. Like, the action looks really fun, inventive, bizarre, weird camera shots where like the camera will like follow a missile, and like, I don't know, it just looks really fun, and I'm excited for it. And I really like the choice of music in the trailer. It's war, which is really fun. Yeah, I actually didn't see the second Kingsman, so this one looks like a fun addition to the franchise, though. So, I'm excited about it. I'm not like over the moon, but what do you think, Darby?
I'm excited about it. I was not a fan of the second one. I was kind of disappointing to me. So this is interesting. They kind of go the prequel route, but this, like Alex said, the cast in this is insane. The action looks great, so definitely I'm on board.
Okay, so let's go to the next trailer, which was just a little tease for Zack Snyder's Justice League.
The bell's already been rung. And they've heard it. The god is dead.
What did you think, Darby, of this little Wonder Woman-centric Justice League teaser?
I was just kind of like, whatever. I'm not the demographic for the Snyder Cut. I don't think. I'm curious about it as a movie. But I'm kind of ready to move on. And I think the dark side sort of tease, like they're teasing something that ultimately will not matter in the extended DC universe, because it's going to be, I guess my question comes back to, they're introducing this multiverse element. What function is the revised Snyder Cut going to serve within the continuity? What, is it going to be? Is it going to be the Joss Whedon theatrical actually happened and then the Snyder Cut actually happened, because it's all a multiverse now?
I didn't think about that.
It's sort of needlessly confusing. So I'm not super into it. I get why people are, but I was like, okay.
Yeah, I don't remember this scene from the trailer or from the movie of her. She's like in some sort of bunker, or like she's like.
I think it wasn't in the movie. Is that the point?
Yeah, I think that's the point. So yeah, and from what I've heard too, like the dark side stuff might even be just like a flashback in the movie. So that, I don't know. We'll have to see, but. it just seems like they kind of kicked out 2 little clips and just to kind of appease the masses while they're working on this director's cut. Maybe once I see it, I'll be able to see Zack Snyder's original vision and I'll get it a little bit more, but the movie didn't impress me very much. And so I'm kind of ready to keep going. But what do you think, Alex?
Yeah, well, I'm excited to see the 4-hour, whatever it's going to be, cut or series, because that is a massive expansion. So there's obviously a lot of extra stuff to see.
Right.
Definitely excited for that. Is there okay, so say we're getting 2 hours more content. It better be a lot more content involving some subplot with Darkseid to justify that tease. Because exactly like you said, Darby, why are you teasing stuff that we ain't going to see? Or why are you teasing stuff that isn't going to pay off? That's the tease you put at the end of the movie. You don't put that tease for the trailer for the movie that we've already seen that's not going to have scenes that pay off that tease.
Right.
Exactly.
It's just it was an odd... I guess I think it's exactly like you said, David. It's here's some scenes.
Yeah. It's just raising more... People. It's raising more questions for me, but I'm hoping that when we see the film or series, whatever it's going to be in its entirety, we'll just be like, okay, that was a story with a beginning, middle, and end, and now it's that. I hope that's what happens. I hope by the end of it, we'll be like, good, we've wrapped it up. And instead, I'm wondering if it's going to open the door to a whole new Zack Snyder universe where they just keep going with Zack Snyder. If that happens, it'll be interesting. Like you said, if there's a multiverse that is slightly different from the actual DCEU, we'll just kind of be branching off in 2 slightly different universes. There'll be Wonder Woman 2 for the DCEU and then Wonder Woman 2 for Zack Snyder's DCEU. I don't know.
But yeah, you're right. Are they going to answer questions or are they going to J.J. Abrams it where they just ask more questions?
Yeah. We'll have to see. Okay, so the next trailer is for Foundation.
You're familiar with my work, psychohistory?
Yes, in theory, but I don't know what it has to do with...
It's not a theory.
This is the new Apple TV Plus series that is coming out next year based on the classic sci-fi novel by Isaac Asimov. So, I haven't read this book, but the trailer looks really intriguing. The visuals are really, really, honestly, they're fantastic for a weekly series. They are super weird and colorful, but still dark. And, it looks interesting. And the cast is really good. Jared Harris is fantastic, and he seems to be one of the main characters. And I love Lee Pace as well. So I'm excited for this. I went from 0 to 60 on this. I had no, real interest in this until I saw the trailer. So now I'm really excited. That between that and Dune, I'm just super excited for classic sci-fi to make a big comeback. What do you think, Darby?
I'm super excited about it. It looks fantastic. I mean, the visuals, like you said, were just amazing. The direction seems great. I'm down for Jared Harris and anything. And Lee Pace also. So that's really cool. The books are classics. They haven't aged very well for me. But as just a sci-fi fan, so much of the DNA of Foundation is in Star Wars in particular. So if you're into that, then they'll definitely be, I'll be interested to see how they translate the books and that architecture of the books into the series. So very excited.
What about you, Alex? What do you think of this?
Apple really want us to get their streaming service. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Like crazy amounts of money to get us in to care about Apple TV. 6 months ago, you probably you wouldn't have thought, but now I keep seeing posters for stuff on Apple TV. The Tom Hanks movie got dropped on there, didn't it? Or it's being produced by them. They're just they're gunning for it. They're trying to get their niche. And you can't blame them. The actual trailer itself, same as you guys, like the cast, like what it looks like. Sci-fi novels like that, you said it's an Asimov, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is it an Asimov? Yeah. That man wrote so much stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many books by him. And I think this is sort of like the world has gotten to a point, and audiences have gotten to a point where we can have a series about this with this kind of budget and it be intriguing, and people, after Westworld, Man in the High Castle, the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, you have an audience there of people that care and want to care about high concept stuff that, while still visually exciting, does explore stuff that will explore intriguing ideas. And I think it's catering exactly for that market.
Yeah. I do want to mention that at the beginning of the trailer, it kind of opens with like this behind the scenes reel, which is cool. Like you see some really cool stuff. You see they're using miniatures for a lot of the ships and stuff, which is really interesting. But then there's like this weird self-serving pat on the back that David S. Goyer does. He's like, Apple TV is the perfect place for this. Like Apple. It's so perfect for sci-fi. I'm like, okay, just show us the footage.
I can't help but like clench up every time I see David S. Goyer's involved in something. It's probably bad of me, but like, years ago I remember reading like an interview or excerpts of like, everyone's like, he co-wrote The Dark Knight. It's like, even he admits that he kind of was the yes man to Jonathan's ideas when they wrote that. Even in an interview, he's kind of hinted that, like, he was cool to do what Jonathan wanted in the script. And I think he sort of proved that he wrote Man of Steel, didn't he?
He did, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is Hamilton.
The $10 founding father without a father got a lot farther by working a lot harder, by being a lot smarter.
Which is premiering on Disney Plus July 3rd. And what did you think, Darby? Have you seen Hamilton before?
I haven't, so I haven't had an opportunity to see it, and I've wanted to. So this is exciting. I mean, this gets, I'm really looking forward to this. It looks great. I've seen snippets of the show on PBS, and this is just kind of more of that. And so, yeah, the one time that I was never able, when I was in New York City, I was never able to see it, and then it came to Des Moines here last year, the year before, and the tickets sold out like in 30 seconds. So this is cool.
Yeah, I was lucky when it came to Chicago. The tickets were selling out like crazy, but they had like a raffle that we got tickets in the nosebleeds for. But cool. Hamilton is a really fun, cool production, and this is going to be cool to see it with mostly the original cast. That's pretty fantastic. And I'm pretty sure I read that this was shot like years ago when they were like full on performing on Broadway. And so this will be really cool to check out. I'm excited. And especially for, I think they wanted it to go on Broadway for a few years and to get as much money from Broadway as possible until finally most people that were going to see it have seen it. And so now they'll release it, on Disney Plus for everybody to see. Now's the time for them to release it, and it looks like a pretty much exactly what I saw on stage. What do you think, Alex?
Well, yeah, I have seen it as well. I saw it here in London on the West End, just like maybe a month before lockdown got in, so just got it just in time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I don't think you're right. I think they probably did, like you said, they did film this a few years ago over 3 separate shows, I'm pretty sure. And it's crazy that they have held on to it for so long, but it's probably exactly for the reason you said, David. But I think now's the time to release it, even if it is a year earlier than they planned and not in the cinema. People are still going to go see it live. You'll see it, and then if anything, it'll probably generate more hype. You'll have people who wouldn't listen, people who are like, I'm not listening to a musical soundtrack. What's wrong with you? I'll just watch. And, people that wouldn't do that will watch this and then go see it live.
Let's move on to the next one, which is Candyman. Which is set for release on September 24th of this year. We'll see if that sticks. But they released a new trailer that there's no dialogue, if I remember correctly. There's no dialogue, and there's no, there's no real people in it. It's actually just these beautiful shadow puppets. and it kind of tells the story of Candyman and his background, and it's this beautiful, interesting kind of visual feast that they release that I think will probably be the opening credits or something like that for the movie, I would assume. But I loved it. I don't think that it would. I actually think it now was the time to release it, because I don't think it would play well in front of movie theaters. Like, I don't think that, like, I think people would probably get bored or something while watching this in front of a movie. But yeah, I thought it was beautiful. What did you think, Darby?
I thought it was interesting. I agree with you that I think in the environment that we're in, it makes sense as a trailer onto itself in front of a movie. Yeah, you're probably like, what's happening? But not a huge horror fan, but I'm curious about this because I am a big fan of Tony Todd, who is coming back to play Candyman. So that's interesting. And then Jordan Peele is producing this. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, everything he does is awesome. So I'm actually kind of interested in this one.
What do you think, Alex?
I'm interested. I rewatched the trailer they released a few months ago for it, and it's a weird juxtaposition between how artistic this trailer is and how much of a somewhat generic horror film the first trailer looked like. So I'm really interested, and especially with Peele producing, I'm interested to see where that line's going to be. Is there going to be a twist? Is there going to be something interesting that makes it somewhat different than this generic slasher, which that original trailer looked like?
Yeah, if it's anything like Get Out, it'll be kind of like a fun mix between the two, where it'll have a lot to say, but it will be entertaining for anybody that just likes horror movies. So yeah, speaking of kind of less traditional trailers, we got a new one for Soul, which is coming out November 20th of this year. What did you think, Alex, of this trailer?
It was good, very good, like very inspirational. You know, looking at humans, and Jamie Foxx's character is narrating and talking about why life's worth living and the joys and the happiness and feelings that give life meaning. It's only a minute long. It's interesting that they've released it now, and I think they've done it very intentionally compared to the first trailer, which I rewatched, which is from whenever ago, which is very your classic trailer. This is the guy, he gets in an accident, and so his soul's separated, and he's in the soul world. And I think they've released this trailer which shows none of that soul stuff. It's purely human based, and I wonder if it's because there has been. I don't think it's, the internet always overplays things. I don't know how much of an issue it actually is, but a lot of people said, oh, look, we've got a complete, all, very heavily black cast and a protagonist that is African-American, and he's a little blue man for the entire film.
Right.
Which I think, obviously, people then compare it to Princess and the Frog, where we're getting our first black Disney princess, and she's a frog for the entire film.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because, like, this trailer is, I think you're right. Like, I think it was like kind of beautiful and just kind of, you get like a feel for the setting that the movie will take place in, or at least the first, act of the movie. But then when you think about it, like the whole movie is probably going to be in this soul world or something. So this isn't really an accurate, representation of what the movie is going to be. And, I don't know, like all the pictures that I've seen in the soul world don't really they don't really excite me that much. It kind of just looks like Inside Out 2. Not even just like the idea that we're inside of someone's consciousness or their soul or something. It's that even the look of it, the character design is like they're little glowies, fuzzy little, things. Like the design looks like the same. I don't know if that's intentional, but I kind of watching this just made me think like, oh, I wish Pixar just made dramas. Like like this doesn't even look like a Pixar movie in the sense that like it's going to have some wacky fantastical plot. Like it just kind of seems like a cute drama. I would watch this as just an animated drama film. But what did you think, Darby, of this little teaser.
I was curious about it. I agree with you guys. It was odd, and it sort of raises questions, I guess, about the final film. I kept thinking of this Robin Williams film, What Dreams May Come, from the 90s, that similar plot-ish, and that I really enjoyed that, even though it maybe wasn't entirely successful as a movie, but it made me think of that, and so I'm really curious about it. I'm curious to see, too, given what Alex said, given the cast is primarily or mostly African American, how they're going to navigate some of the things, or some of the conversations, I should say, that are kind of going on right now.
Yeah.
In particular with animation. So
I'm hoping to trust Pixar, and that maybe they don't want to give the game away, but maybe, you know, the whole point of the film is that he teaches Tina Fey's character, 22, I think it is, that she should want to be a soul that wants to go to a body because it's worth living. And, you know, the joke, the gag in the original trailer was that as souls, they can't eat, they can't feel, they can't touch, they can't smell, that kind of thing. And that's all part of what your body does. And so I'm thinking maybe there is more human element, like we'll see more human parts, because that may be the technique he uses to show her.
Yeah, we'll cut back and forth.
What it's worth. We might, exactly. We might show the moments of him becoming a school teacher, him enjoying playing piano, his interest in jazz. We'll see.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and get into our next segment, which is Quickfire News.
In exciting musical news, Judy Kramer, the producer of Mamma Mia and Mamma Mia 2, as well as the stage musical, has said that she has started to think about ideas for a third movie, making a Mamma Mia trilogy during the lockdown. It's very early days, there's no plans, but even the idea that it's on the table wasn't known before, so it's exciting that the idea is out there.
So apparently Elizabeth Banks will portray Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus in a new production at Universal. She's also going to be producing the film with Mark Platt from La La Land and Adam Siegel, who did Drive. And so I'm kind of interested in this, but I'm also, you know, I like Elizabeth Banks, but she doesn't really give off the energy of Miss Frizzle from what I remember of Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus. I think she'll have a lot of fun with it, but, you know, I was hoping for somebody a little bit louder and crazier. She wouldn't have been my first choice, but, you know, the fact that she's also producing is interesting, so I'm excited to see what her vision for this movie is, and we'll see how it goes.
Sure, yeah, this is really cool. So for fans of Scott Pilgrim, the anime or the comic book, I should say, or the movie, apparently, there's a new version of this, an anime version coming potentially, that the cast talked about in a recent interview that they gave with Entertainment Weekly. So that's really cool because the film is great. I love it. Really underrated. It didn't do very well at the box office. I guess you'd call it a cult classic. I don't know how other people feel about it, honestly, but it's cool that there could be more Scott Pilgrim in the world. So.
In more news for Jurassic World Dominion, the list of people returning continues as the original Jurassic Park villain Louis Dodgson comes back. You'll probably remember him from the first one as the guy that handed off the shaving can that had all the embryo slots in it. He's also the one with the classic joke that's become a meme with the like, "We got Dodgson over here, we got Dodgson." Nope, nobody cares, see? Playing Dodgson this time will be Campbell Scott from House of Cards and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. He'll be taking over the role from Cameron Thor, who played it in 1993, because Cameron Thor is currently in prison. But yeah, it's exciting news for the film. We're getting almost the entire original cast from the first two back, including this character. I assume he'll be playing, you know, the evil villain that was behind everything, or the higher ups, or something like that. But it continues my interest in Jurassic World Dominion.
Phil Lord and Chris Miller have a new project coming, and it's going to be a creative spin on the Whodunit. It's coming exclusively to Apple TV Plus, and it's called The After Party. The plot revolves around a suspicious death that occurs at a high school reunion after party. Each of the 8 episodes will actually be a retelling of the same night, but told from a different character's perspective. And each one of these episodes is going to be, since they're from a different character's POV, they're going to be their own genre, their own take on a genre, with a unique visual style. And so think Knives Out meets Rashomon. It sounds fascinating, and like all of Lord and Miller's stuff, I'm really excited about this. I think it sounds really creative and interesting and bizarre and funny. So I'm very excited about this.
More Edgar Wright news. So he has a film coming out, hopefully, eventually, called The Chain, which is kind of horror-ish, kind of a mystery. It's about a single mother cancer survivor whose kid is kidnapped. And then, and probably the most interesting part about this, what the kidnappers want for her to do in order to get her child back is to kidnap a child from another family, or else they'll kill her kid, which is sort of the ultimate sick version of a chain letter, I guess. So that it's really interesting sort of idea based on a novel from 2019 by Adrian McKenty. So definitely could be interesting.
We've got news of a Chicken Run sequel, which is going to start production next year. Both Aardman Animations and Netflix have announced. The first Chicken Run is the highest grossing stop motion film in history, even to this day, which is surprising, and it's surprising that it's taken this long for a sequel to come about. But that it has probably means that the script is good enough and they've given it the go-ahead. Ginger and Rocky are back, but whether Julia Sawalha and Mel Gibson are coming back to play them hasn't been announced either. So it's really early days, but the producers and directors basically just talked about the idea that it's going to pick up with Ginger and Rocky, the main characters, giving birth to their daughter, who grows up quickly, and she's going to want to explore the outside world. So it's going to be a different take on the theme. Like Great Escape was obviously the first one, and this one will obviously probably a different type of homage. It was a great film. It's a classic, even more so here in the UK because it's an English company, Aardman Animations. So I'm very excited to see what they do.
Yeah, Joel Schumacher passed away recently at the age of 80, and he's probably one of the most interesting directors of the last 40 years. And most people, especially in genre circles, tend to think of him for the Batman films and as sort of maligned. And, we could spend an hour on those, but suffice to say, he was an outstanding director who contributed a lot, and he had quite the varied career. He was a costume designer, production designer, I believe, also, and then he was a director who gave us a lot of films: St. Elmo's Fire, Lost Boys, Tigerland, and there's so many. And he worked for a long time, produced a lot of interesting stuff. The Batman films, if anything, you can talk forever about them because there's so much there to love or hate depending on where you fall. So, R.I.P. Joel Schumacher. He was a really good director.
Also in tragic news, Ian Holm has passed away. He was a Shakespearean actor originally, and he kind of gained fame as he got a little older when he played the role of Ash in Alien, which is a really fascinating character. Probably what most people know him from is playing Bilbo Baggins in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I just absolutely love his performance in those films. I think he brings a lot of warmth, but also just he's actually kind of frightening in this role too, with his obsession over the ring as well. So he really brings a lot to especially the first film. He, I think, grounds it in a way and just kind of carries the first third of that movie, almost entirely on his back. And I just absolutely love him in that part. He's also known for a bunch of other films, Time Bandits, Brazil, Naked Lunch, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. He got an Oscar nomination for a role in Chariots of Fire. A lot of people also know him from The Fifth Element and Garden State. He was a really, really fantastic actor. It's sad to see him go. He'll be remembered for many years to come. Moving on, we're going to get into a little bit of what we've been watching. I guess I'll go first. I kind of continued my Black Lives Matter watching by diving deep into some of the Spike Lee films that I hadn't seen. So I watched Da 5 Bloods, which is the new film on Netflix that he directed. It's a really interesting Vietnam film starring a bunch of older guys who are vets that go back to Vietnam to seek out some buried treasure that they discovered while they were soldiers. It's a really, really, really interesting movie. I don't think it works completely. There's a couple bizarre, weird things about it. It's a little convoluted, but I still think it's like really, really interesting and unique. And also, there's a really great performance by one of the actors, Delroy Lindo, that I think might get him an Oscar nomination. It's fantastic. I also watched He Got Game, which is one of Spike's older movies starring Denzel Washington as he's a convict in prison, and he is released for a week to try to convince his son to go to a certain school for basketball. It's because the warden and the governor are so interested in basketball, and they have money riding on this kid getting into a certain school. It's really interesting. I liked it. It was fun, and I'd recommend it. Also, I already mentioned that I went to the drive-in to see Jaws. I went and saw it was a double feature of The Evil Dead and Jaws. And I had never seen Evil Dead before, so that was a really fun watch. I loved it. And just all of the practical effects were mind-blowing. It's a really fun, classic horror. But what was interesting is going to the drive-in. Jaws sounded fantastic over the FM radio that they were playing, but Evil Dead was first, and it sounded absolutely terrible. So beware when you go to the drive-in. Like, sometimes they might not have their technical prowess up to snuff. But since it sounded so bad, it was like they had the volume of the movie all the way down, and so it was mostly like frequency and like white noise what I was hearing. And so luckily I have unlimited data on my phone, and Evil Dead is streaming on Netflix, so I paired my phone to the Bluetooth in the car and then synced it manually to the movie.
Wow.
Which was so worth it.
That is some Iron Man level tech stuff.
Yeah, so that was a really great experience. Like I said, just going to see some of these old movies is really fun. I luckily have like 3 drive-ins 30 minutes away from me. So
that's awesome.
So every weekend there's something playing near me that I can go see from the safety of my car. Also, I just want to mention I finished my Dark Crystal rewatch of the TV series. And I was watching it with a couple friends virtually. We've been, watching it through Netflix Party, and then also having a voice call going on at the same time while we watch it, which has been really fun. It's a fantastic series. I recommend it to anybody that likes fantasy. I think it's very, very well done. And then after we finished the show, we watched the original movie from the 80s, which was interesting because I hadn't seen it in years. And now that I've seen the TV series twice, I feel like I know so much about the universe and about the context of the movie. And it kind of reminds me of my sister-in-law watched Rogue One before she ever watched the original Star Wars. And so, and when she watched it, she told me, she was like, how does the original Star Wars make any sense without watching Rogue One? Which is hilarious. And that's kind of how I felt watching the Dark Crystal film again. I wasn't while watching the show, I wasn't completely aware of all the connections that they made to the movie. And it's honestly like such a fantastic, weird experience watching the movie after the show because of all of the meticulous stuff they did in the show to set up the movie. It's really interesting. So why don't we go over to you, Alex? What have you been watching recently?
So I just a couple of days ago watched the new Netflix film Eurovision Song Contest: The Story of Fire Saga. It's a new film with Will Ferrell and Rachel McAdams. It's, for those that don't know, the Eurovision is it's the Eurovision Song Contest, and so it's been going on since the 60s, I believe. It's where ABBA won and became famous. Essentially, it's a song contest that all of Europe is a part of. You enter an act, and they all sing, and then each country votes for it, and you vote at home. Makes it sound very sort of generic, but it's because it's been going on so long, it's developed these weird kind of culture parts, and it's considered like it's just odd. It's not people trying to, it's established acts. It's not new people trying to get fame. It's usually people who are quite established in their home country, but not internationally. They have to enter someone each year, and it's usually like the weirdest acts. Like they're all quite camp, or they'll be quite weird. One time there was like one of the winners a few years ago was like a Denmark death metal band, like a proper one with like they had wings and like proper makeup and stuff. They've had, like I said, ABBA won. So, that says, that kind of camp, kind of fun style. Sometimes they have, guys with like big beards. There's like a trio of them and they all sing some weird lumberjack song. It's absolutely batshit. And it's so much fun, and it's like a massive tradition here. And I was reading about it, and Will Ferrell got interested in it because his wife is European. I can't remember where from. So he actually got to go and see it a few years ago in the finals. And then in preparation for this movie, he followed, I think, the Swedish team around on the backstage to work out how it was all done. And so this film is about him and Rachel McAdams are friends from a small Icelandic town, and he is like a 45, 50-year-old man living at home with his dad who still wants to make it big and be in Eurovision. It's good. It's a Netflix film. Like if you'd paid to see it, you'd be a little bit more disappointed, but it's free, it's fun. It's classic Ferrell. It's classic like 2008 Ferrell, like semi-pro kind of thing, right, where it's like it's not reaching new heights. It probably won't hit cult status. It's just stupid and fun. If you like Eurovision, there's a bunch of former Eurovision people in there.
Great.
Yeah, if you're from the UK, they get the guy who is a famous talk show presenter here, Graham Norton, who does the commentary for our Eurovision. He provides the commentary in the film for when they're performing.
That's fun.
Disaster ensues. Yeah, there's Pierce Brosnan's in it. They all do terrible accents. But it's good. It's fun. It's like an hour and 50, and you'll just watch it and it'll just breeze past, and it's stupid with a few twists and turns.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. And then TV-wise, I finished Community off, which is fantastic. If you haven't seen that, I'll always recommend it, especially if you're a fan of film and TV, because it literally plays on its own tropes. And then Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is another one I would always recommend. The new season is coming out week by week. If you stopped at the end of season 1, I would urge anyone to either start again, keep going, or if you're really that against it, start at the start of season 2, because it is just so good, and the quality held up so well. And it's crazy that, like, I remember when all the Netflix ones came out and everyone was like, this is peak, but they sort of all seemed to die off in their second or third seasons. The quality dropped, whereas Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has just kept on trucking. And this final season is 13 episodes, and it's like a pure love letter to the show and to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't want to say sort of spoil anything, but it's that, time travel's involved, and there's just like lots of references to stuff. Yeah, so especially if you liked the Agent Carter series as well, it sort of links into that. So get on it.
Very fun. What about you, Darby? What have you been watching?
I haven't been watching a ton, but I just started watching the new season of Search Party. Started on HBO Max on Friday, and I'm a big fan of that series, which is sort of this comedy mystery about these 4 young Brooklynites who get involved in the disappearance of an acquaintance, but it becomes the most important thing ever and derails into the sort of Hitchcockian thing, which is really interesting. And the new season just dropped after a pretty big gap of like 2 years between season 2 and season 3. So it's really good. Stars Alia Shawkat. And then I'm also watching this Harley Quinn cartoon from the DC universe, which I had not seen before. Started watching. It is insane. It's awesome. If you're a Harley Quinn fan or just DC fan in general, it's great. So love it.
Very cool. Okay, so let's get into our last segment here, which is what we're hung up on. We were all kind of hung up on the same thing this week, and it's just kind of an interesting conversation to have. So Jenny Slate has decided to leave the show Big Mouth because her character is a black character, and she is a white woman, and also Kristen Bell has followed suit and left the show Central Park. And also the actor behind the character of Cleveland Brown from Family Guy has left that role as well. And so this is just kind of interesting discussion about white actors playing black characters. And then also there's been some other stuff going on in TV where older episodes of TV shows like Scrubs, 30 Rock, and Community have like removed or edited episodes of their show that kind of reference or have blackface in the episodes. And so I don't know. I personally, I feel like these actors are probably, if they want to leave the role of their own accord, then, that's fine and good. But I also feel like this isn't really what the problem is, and this isn't what the Black Lives Matter movement is asking for. I've seen a lot of people online being like, okay, that's great, but we just want police to stop killing African American people. Like, that's really the issue here. Like, this is great, I guess, but I think that one of the things about voice acting is that voice actors can play anyone. And, I've also seen the argument online, like, what about Phil Lamar, who is a black voice actor who plays a character of Samurai Jack? With the removal of certain episodes of TV shows, I feel like this is something that like could be fine with the disclaimer at the beginning of the episode. I don't know. I don't know. I'm kind of torn on it. I feel like this is not the solution to the problem that people are asking for, really. What do you think, Alex?
I think, yeah, it's tough, and I think it does definitely come down to, like, again, this isn't what the Black Lives Matter is about at all. Like, they want the police to stop brutalizing them, and they also want, systematic racism and institutionalized racism removed and corrected in the systems that they're a part of. I feel like they obviously do want more representation in film and in movies and in animation and all that kind of stuff, as anyone would. Everyone wants to see themselves as they grow up and who they are in the content that they watch. But to some extent, it does feel like a little bit of a looking to play a part in it rather than actively being the change. The episodes, I agree with you, though, it's tough. The removal of the episodes, I understand what they're doing, but I think the warning is good enough, because really what you want to do is you want to change people's hearts and minds and opinions so much that when they see this history, if it truly is wrong, that they're offended or aghast by it. You watch some of the old episodes, you watch some 90s sitcoms now, and some of the sexist comments they make, the transphobic comments, and you're like, oof, you can feel that oof inside your inside your chest when they say this stuff, and that's what you want. You want people to watch this stuff. Yeah, you want them to take the good out of it, but you also want them to go, oof, the past wasn't a great place. And I feel by taking those episodes out, you're pretending that the past has always been perfect, and I think it is a little revisionist, especially considering that with a lot of those scenes, especially the Community one, they are particularly calling out the absurdity of it. So, I don't know.
Yeah, what do you think, Darby?
It's one of those situations where there's so many hard questions and it's a hard conversation to have because there's so many fault lines in it. I think from the representation point of view, the thing I was hung up on is I didn't realize how pervasive this was, that people of characters of color in these animated shows were not being played by people of color. And so Jenny Slate, Kristen Bell, absolutely. I don't understand how that happened, that black people should play black people. On the flip side of that, like you said, David, like Phil Lamar, you think about someone like him who's played hundreds of characters at this point, white, black, and otherwise. Would you say that Phil Lamar couldn't play Samurai Jack anymore? I don't think anybody would suggest that. So, but then it's like at the same time, was it appropriate for Hank Azaria to play Apu? Was it appropriate for Mike Henry to play Cleveland Brown? I don't know. These conversations have gone on for quite a while with those characters. There's that documentary in particular with Apu. And so on one hand, Apu's an icon because he's representative of people of Indian Americans who don't see themselves on TV. At the same time, he comes off as a character and he's not played by an Indian American, as talented as Hank Azaria is. So it's complicated with the blackface episodes. I think that's complicated too. I think it tends to be an overreaction. I think a disclaimer, an educational piece about it is important because this is the kind of, I feel like, and I could be wrong, I'm not an expert or an authority on it, but this is the same kind of conversation people have had in regards to books, like Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, in which the language in there is racist, and people have wanted to ban those, but they're not. They're there. They're moments. They're examples of history and moments in time that are there to be instructive as to what not to say, what not to do. So maybe these TV episodes are the same.
It's an interesting discussion to have, and I assume that this will continue probably till the end of time.
Yeah.
Because in how we view art and whether it's a commentary or whether we should take it at face value or how much the context matters. So yeah, going forward, I'm sure we'll continue to be thinking about this and hearing more stories about this kind of thing.
We have to stay vigilant. That's really the sort of conclusion, I suppose, is that we do have to stay vigilant and keep ourselves aware and keep ourselves checked. But yeah, who knows what the right answer is.
Well, on that note, let's wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Movie News Network. If you like the show and want to help us out, make sure you subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with your friends. And so, Darby, where can people keep up with you on the web?
My website is darbyharn.com, and then also on Twitter at darbyharn.
And Alex, how can people follow you?
On Twitter, at new_Macca, MACCA.
And again, I'm David Wall. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Davis_Wally. If you like this podcast, try out the Resistance broadcast. It's a show by our sister site, Star Wars Newsnet. It goes deep into discussion about a galaxy far, far away. And as always, for more up-to-date news stories, be sure to regularly check out movienewsnet.com.